Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Roofing Contractor, Walls and Ceilings, and Building Enclosure. And thank you for joining us. It's always a great day when we have the opportunity to share some incredible nuggets of legal insight. And Art Eisner and I are honored to be here today with Trent Cotney, the CEO of Cotney Attorneys and Consultants. So Trent, thank you so much for joining us.
Jill and Art, it's always a pleasure. Really looking forward to talking to you about the latest events today. So thank you for having me.
Well, there's no doubt every week there's lots to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
So Art, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, Trent. Let's start off. You're based in the Tampa area. Let's give us an update on how you handled Tropical Storm Elsa and what's the status there?
So, Art, it's interesting you asked that. I'm a native Floridian. I'm actually a fifth generation Floridian. So there's a couple of things that we don't get very concerned about. One are usually named storms unless there are three. And the other thing is alligators. So, I can tell you when the tropical storm was coming through, I'm like, it's going to be some rain and some wind and, whatever. When it turned into a hurricane and it was veering closer to the Tampa Bay area, I was more concerned about possible floodwaters and things like that. It's always the flood, not necessarily the wind. With the Florida Building Code and the high velocity hurricane zone that we have in a lot of areas down in Florida, stuff is built generally to last pretty well, but it's the flood damage that causes me some concern. But thankfully, all we had was a lot of rain. So my grass looks great, and God bless. We got through that one. I'm sure there'll be more, but yeah, no problems here.
All right, good to hear. I guess on a more serious note, for Tampa, congratulations to your Tampa Bay Lightning for another Stanley Cup victory. I do want to ask: is Tampa ready for a hockey dynasty?
Absolutely.
Doesn't sound right.
We're three-peat. That's what we're doing. And I got to tell you guys, I had a blast during that because our Canadian offices, I gave it to them every second I could, it was fantastic. They take hockey as a religion up there. And I love the Lightning, follow them. I appreciate it. But great times. We really had fun kind of, jabbing back and forth as the playoffs unfolded, and especially the Stanley Cup. So, yeah, congrats to Tampa. They pulled it off again.
All right, well, let's stick with Florida for a minute. Over the weekend, a federal judge put a halt on enforcement of part of Florida's new insurance laws that we've been talking about. And it came from a challenge from a roofing contractor. Tell us about what this means and what's next.
So, what was very interesting is that there have been a couple of challenges that have been filed as a result of the law that ultimately came from Senate Bill 76. And the idea behind that was that there were some limitations on advertisement and solicitation that you could do, especially door-to-door type stuff. Those things were challenged. And the nature of the challenges, there was a variety of different theories brought, but one of the biggest was First Amendment challenge. And the idea behind that is that, you should have the ability to be able to, sell certain things and do certain things without prohibition. As the law was crafted, there was apparently a colorable argument for a federal judge to issue what is known as a preliminary injunction. And for our listeners, let me just take a brief second to explain what that means. A preliminary injunction doesn't mean that it's done forever, right? It just means that the judge has done a review and determined that there is it passes the sniff test enough to halt the current course of action until a determination can be made for one of two things: either rescind the injunction and the law goes forward as usual, or to transform that preliminary injunction into a permanent injunction, which halts it forever, okay? That decision will more than likely come, we're pulling the docket to kind of see where it's going to come, but it'll probably be a month or so before that's heard. And it is like a full-blown trial. It is a significant issue. The injunction hearings that we've had in the past, you get geared up for it just like you would trial. Going to be interesting to see where it pans out. I do anticipate that the Florida legislature will revisit that issue and possibly look to craft something that may survive judicial scrutiny. So I don't know ultimately where it will end up, but this is not a surprise to me. I knew it would be challenged. And, we'll just have to wait and see ultimately what the court does there.
So can this really boil down to a matter of free speech for, a roofing contractor to be able to say or give the pitch he wants to give at that doorstep?
Yeah, and it's real interesting because there's an intersection of free speech and business as well, right? So, there are some different issues there with regard to what limitations can be put into place. Now, obviously, there are a variety of restrictions on free speech. You can't go into a crowded room and yell fire, and there's a lot of other things that you can't say or do that could potentially incite violence or things of that nature. But with regard to the law itself that was passed, that's the crux of the argument. Is it overbroad in its restriction of what a contractor can say or do? And the preliminary injunction that was issued was 44 pages long. It's not an easy read. I posted the whole thing on my LinkedIn page and barely had enough space to put it up there. So I think that because it is in federal court, what the listener should understand is that usually the federal clerks that write a lot of the orders that work hand in hand with the judges, this will be based, won or lost, based on the constitutional challenge. It is going to be a law review type decision, meaning that it is going to be well written, and we'll see what happens from there. Again, I think the legislature is definitely looking at it. They're aware of it. I anticipate that when session comes up, session is early this year. It starts in January. I think they are absolutely going to have their eyes on this and look to see how they can address it.
Okay, well, something else we're keeping an eye on is the infrastructure bill currently making its way through Washington. Some progress on that the last time we talked about it, and we're already hearing about a possible second infrastructure bill. What's that about, and how can contractors possibly benefit?
Right. So this whole infrastructure thing is just a mess. I mean, the legal term for it is a hot mess. That's what it is. So it is, you've got a variety of different plans all proceeding down separate tracks. And most recently, less than 24 hours ago, Biden met with Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, to discuss, his own thoughts. He had wanted a $6 trillion infrastructure package. Ultimately, there was some discussion about maybe scaling that back to a 3.5 trillion. There's been some discussion about maybe a bipartisan 1.2 trillion. So the ideas are trying to push this through by the end of August. Whether or not it happens, there is just so much horse trading going on. Here's what's interesting, Art, is, this is called an infrastructure bill, but if you really look through it, there's a lot in there that has absolutely nothing to do with infrastructure. And that's not atypical for any bill that goes through Congress, but this is a spending bill. And there is a lot of horse trading, a lot of back and forth. And Republicans and a lot of lobbyists behind the scenes are significantly concerned about inflation and the impact on future taxes. So, that will always be an undercurrent here of what's going on, even though we're at a 50-50 split, as far as the Senate goes. You can anticipate that there will be additional wrangling as we move forward.
All right, well, keeping it in DC, the NRCA also reported that the Small Business Administration is planning to withdraw the loan necessity questionnaire required for borrowers that exceeded $2 million with the PPP program. Will this affect many contractors out there?
Probably not too many, because at this point, most of them have already executed the loan questionnaire. And just a backstory so that the listeners understand where that came from. Associated General Contractors filed a lawsuit contesting that form, that questionnaire form, saying that it was overbroad, that it didn't go through the normal process, that it could potentially be discriminatory in nature, and that as part of the settlement negotiations that were occurring, they agreed to just withdraw it altogether. So a lot of times what we find, Art, is that, when we file bid protest or we challenge government action, sometimes taking the ball and going home is the best way to get things resolved. And this may be an instance of that. Overall, we have seen less concern and worry about, crossing the T's and dotting the I's with regard to some of the stuff that's out there. Obviously, the Treasury and the IRS is still very concerned about misuse of PPP funds. But the idea was, several months ago, was to streamline the process, keep it easy. And I think that still is the case. And what's interesting, Art, is right now from contractors, we are getting a ton of complaints about not being able to get refunds. There is a huge backlog. As of tax day, the IRS was, behind 35 million, submittals to get refunds back. So a lot of contractors are waiting on nice refunds, whether it's personal or whatnot, and can't get it. And if you try calling the IRS right now, you better be prepared to sit there for 2 or 3, 4 hours, because it's going to take a long time to get through.
Wow. Well, too bad they don't have a line on roofing supplies. Maybe there could be a way they could work something out, right?
Right, barter.
Barter it that way. Jeremy, while I have you, I want to turn to some recent news on roofingcontractor.com. The theme of our July e-magazine is technology, which we've talked a lot about in our series here. One of the things that really stood out, though, this year, and during the pandemic, were a lot of these tech-related partnerships that were occurring between companies in the roofing space. Is that something you noticed too? And can you talk about, I guess, what some of the benefits are for contractors, now that these companies are starting to team up?
Yeah, absolutely. COVID-19 was a very interesting time. I mean, obviously we're still in it, but when things were shut down, I know we did the same thing. We started reaching out to our industry partners, started talking to them about big ideas. I mean, you get a lot of time to sit in front of a computer and think, right? And what we have seen in the industry, and I think your article, just nailed it. What's happened is that there's been greater collaboration. There's been a greater goal to share ideas and thoughts and to come out with collaborative type products that check multiple boxes. And, we had talked about it on previous, interviews. One of the things that I think we will continue to see is that as demand increase and as the lack of skilled labor and the lack of materials increases, you got to look to things like technology to help bridge the gap on some of this stuff, right? And that necessity, was just ignited during COVID-19. So I think what you're seeing now is sort of the aftermath of that huge explosion of impetus that happened during COVID-19, encouraging all these companies to, start working together to look towards what the future is and to create and add efficiencies to the industry that desperately needs it right now.
All right, thanks. We've also recently reported on some roofing companies that are making acquisitions, particularly in the Florida market. But why are we seeing companies consider consolidation nowadays? And are we going to see more of this too as we continue to emerge from the pandemic?
Absolutely. So we have been involved in a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and we have, been involved as consultants or on the legal side with regard to strategic alliances. You guys reported on the alliance that two of our good friends and customers, Reliant and Kelly, got together, and that makes sense. It's two different geographic regions, similar business models. You're going to see that over and over again. And what it does is it creates a synergy, a referral process. It gives you geographic reach without the overhead, process. So I really think that that as we move forward, especially given the tough times that contractors are facing with material lead times and material shortages, that this kind of consolidation and partnership, working together, you're going to see more and more of it. There is a greater tendency for contractors to share ideas and to work together. I was just in Chicago all week last week, right? And I had a lot of time to spend, not only at NRCA, but I met with a lot of the Chicago roofing contractors that we work with, and they work together fantastic. They share materials. They are helping each other out, even though they are competitors. And it's something to see. It is that level of camaraderie and understanding that we're all in this together, and I expect to see, as times get more difficult, especially as we get into fall, I think you're going to see more and more contractors recognize that that's a way to really circle the wagons.
Very interesting. What else is on your mind, Trent?
So something very interesting, I try to read the tea leaves, right? Like you got to, when it comes to politics, when it comes to politicians, you got to understand, you never listen to what people say. You got to understand what's really going on behind the scenes. And, shout out to Craig Brydup, our national lobbyist, does a fantastic job. But one of the things that I found incredibly interesting was that Biden did an executive order recently. There were 72 separate orders within that order, right? And there were a couple of things, there are tons of stuff in there, stuff dealing with healthcare, stuff dealing with the internet, transportation charges, all kinds of stuff. But there were a couple of things that really stuck out to me, okay? And one was a lot of direction that he gave to the Federal Trade Commission. Now, for our listeners that don't know, the FTC deals with antitrust issues. So one of the things that he said is that he believes that non-competes are detrimental to the workforce, especially when we need more workers now. And he has directed the FTC to take a look at limiting or banning non-competes. Now, the latest stats I have seen show that, somewhere between 50 and 56% of businesses engage in some kind of non-compete to the extent that you can. Some states don't allow it, like California, for example. But what a non-compete does is it basically says that you cannot go to another company for a period of time that is a competitor to the company you're working at, right? And it allows you to lock in talent and not have to worry about that talent directly competing against you. And it's usually higher level employees. So what's interesting is if the FTC does do something with this, if they decide to limit it or ban it, what is the impact on that on the industry? Because there are a lot of industry professionals, employers that use non-competes, especially for C-level or high-level people that have access to a significant amount of proprietary and confidential information. The other thing that I saw that was really interesting was he directed the FTC to take a look at occupational licenses, okay, and said that he did not like the fact that you can't take these licenses from state to state. He believed it was an impediment to business. So the question that I'm sure you're asking is a roofing license an occupational license? Probably not. And it's probably a trade license. Is a lawyer license an occupational license? Maybe. So maybe it'll be easier instead of me having to take an exam in every state like I have to. Maybe it'll be easier, but I don't know. Okay. The thing that I'm putting out there is what this is signaling, and what our listeners should understand is that Biden is focused on reducing a lot of these, what he believes are barriers to free employment across the U.S. Okay, again, this is part of his union initiative, so it's kind of tied to that. Okay, but when I'm looking at non-competes and I'm looking at reducing occupational licenses, that makes me wonder, where does that go? How does that impact our industry? What's to come? But you don't put something out there like that unless you intend to do something with it. So stay tuned, because as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, because that could change a lot of people's contractual employment agreements right now that are either under non-competes, or if you're an employer, you're the one issuing non-competes.
Well, and certainly one of the things that did not get a lot of attention while we're focused on everything else. Thanks a lot, Trent. Jill, back to you.
Really good insight, Trent. It's always fascinating to listen to you and hear what's going on. But quickly, can you share with everybody listening and watching? I know you've got a webinar coming up with ARCA, with the Arizona contractors. When is that?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Absolutely. So it's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We are talking, it's the latest on the materials issue. And when I say the latest, I am constantly updating and changing my tactics, my techniques to deal with this issue. So it's everything from material pricing to material volatility, delays, liquidated damages, anything and everything that deals with this issue. I'm going to share it with my friends at ARCA. I've got a lot of great contractors I know out there. It's a great group, and I look forward to speaking tomorrow.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Yes. Who doesn't love Arizona, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Trent, again, thank you so much for joining us. If anybody has any questions for Trent, you can reach out to him at cotneycl.com. And if you have any questions for us, you can reach out to us at roofingcontractor.com, wconline.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for our free e-newsletters. Check out our new e-magazine. The platform is incredible. And also make sure you follow us on all of our social channels like LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, because that's where we post a lot of these great interviews with Trent. So you can capture all these incredible nuggets. But also, speaking of LinkedIn, make sure you check out the video that we just posted from Peter Horch and what he's going to be speaking on at Best of Success coming up this September. In fact, Trent is going to be speaking as well. It's something you're not going to want to miss. So again, thank you so much for watching and listening. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy. We look forward to talking to you soon.